I never imagined a simple conversation could change everything. But then again, I never thought I'd end up being the punchline of a joke that wasn't even funny. It all began when I overheard something that would stay with me long after the night ended. I was walking into the kitchen, trying to grab a quick snack before heading to bed. It was around 11 p.m., and I had just finished a long, tiring day at work. Emma, my wife, and her friend Olivia were sitting at the kitchen table, laughing. I thought it was nothing unusual. After all, they'd been friends for years. But what stopped me in my tracks wasn't the sound of their voices. It was the content of their conversation. I don't know, Emma said, with a chuckle in her voice. Do you think it would be too much? I mean, it would be hilarious to see him react. Olivia's laugh echoed through the room. Come on, Emma. He won't even notice. It'll be so easy to mess with him. It's not like he ever picks up on anything. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what I had just heard. Emma and Olivia were clearly talking about me. But what was it? What were they planning? The idea of my wife and her friend conspiring against me made my stomach turn. I guess you're right, Emma replied, the tone of her voice sharp but playful. It's just a little harmless fun. I'll bet he'll never see it coming. Bet? Fun? What was this? I didn't know how to feel, shocked, confused, or even betrayed. And yet, somehow, I knew I was in for something that I wasn't going to like. I turned to walk away, hoping to leave the conversation behind me, but I couldn't. There was something nagging at me, pulling me back. I had to know. What were they planning? So I waited. I spent the next couple of hours pretending to watch TV, but my mind kept racing. My wife, Emma, had always been the life of the party, the one who could joke around and make everyone laugh. I had always been content to sit back, let her shine, and take the quieter, more reserved role in our relationship. But hearing that conversation, it made me question everything. Was I just the person she humiliated for her own amusement? Was I so easy to ignore that she found it entertaining to mess with me? The more I thought about it, the more I started to worry about what was coming next. And sure enough, the very next day, Emma dropped a bombshell. We're having some friends over tonight, she said casually as I poured myself a coffee in the morning. It'll be just the usual group, Olivia, Jake, and a few others. You know, the usual crowd. I nodded, still trying to shake off the unsettling feeling from the night before. But then Emma added something else, something that made my heart skip a beat. We're going to play a game tonight, she said with a smile. Just a little fun. You'll love it, trust me. At first, I thought it was just one of those typical games they played. Truth or dare, charades, something lighthearted. But then I remembered the conversation I overheard the night before. I wasn't sure why, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. Something told me this game wasn't going to be anything like what I expected. Little did I know, that night would change everything. It would be the night I realized how little I truly meant to Emma. And it all started with a bet. The evening arrived, and the moment I had been dreading finally unfolded before me. Emma was getting ready, and I could hear her in the bathroom, laughing with her friends as they got dressed for the night. I tried to brush off the anxiety gnawing at me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had mentioned that tonight was supposed to be fun, but there was a cold, unsettling edge to her tone that I couldn't ignore. The past few days had been filled with small, uncomfortable moments. The teasing remarks, the inside jokes they shared that I was never a part of. And now, here I was, standing on the edge of whatever game Emma had in mind, unsure of how I had become the target. As I sat in the living room, waiting for them to finish, I couldn't help but replay that conversation from the other night in my mind. I'll bet he won't notice, Emma had said. It'll be hilarious to see how long it takes him to catch on. The words echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that this wasn't just a harmless prank. Whatever they had planned, it wasn't going to be a joke. When Emma finally came into the room, she was dressed in a sleek, red dress that hugged her body perfectly. She looked stunning, as usual, but there was something in her eyes, a glint that I hadn't seen before. It was as if she knew something I didn't, and it made my skin crawl. Are you ready? She asked, her voice cheerful, but there was an underlying edge to it. I tried to muster a smile and nod, but I could feel the unease building up inside me. As we arrived at the party, I immediately noticed the difference. The air felt charged, almost electric. Emma's friends were already gathered, their laughter filling the space, but there was something about the way they looked at me, like I was a spectator, not a participant. I tried to join in on the conversations, But every time I spoke, there was this awkward silence, followed by a quick change of topic. I couldn't help but feel out of place. I was the outsider, the one they all laughed at behind my back. But I still didn't understand why. Then, as the night wore on, Emma's friend Olivia stood up and announced, "All right, time for the game." My heart sank. I knew exactly what was coming. This was no ordinary party game. This was their twisted version of a fun night. I tried to play it off like I wasn't bothered, but I could feel the tension in the room. The others were eagerly looking at me, waiting to see how I would react. "What's the game?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though my nerves were getting the best of me. Olivia flashed a wicked smile. "Oh, it's simple. We're going to see how well you know Emma. We're going to ask you questions about her, and if you answer wrong, you'll have to do a dare." I swallowed hard. This was just the beginning, I realized. They were going to make me look foolish, and the rest of them would be in on the joke. "All right," I said, forcing a laugh. "Let's get this over with." The first question came from Jenna, one of Emma's childhood friends. "What's Emma's favorite color?" she asked, a playful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I had no doubt in my mind that I knew the answer. Emma had always talked about how much she loved purple. It was her favorite color, without question. "Purple," I answered confidently. Jenna's eyes glimmered with amusement. "Wrong," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "It's actually blue. Remember Greg?" The others burst into laughter, and I felt a sharp pang in my chest. They had already set me up to fail. The game continued, and with each question, I felt myself sinking deeper into the role they had assigned me. The clueless husband, the one who couldn't even remember the most basic details about his wife. With each wrong answer, the laughter grew louder. Emma, who had been sitting there with a smug smile, now seemed to be enjoying herself more than ever. I could see the way her eyes flicked toward her friends, the way she looked at them for approval. It was as if she was taking pleasure in watching me squirm. By the time it was my turn to ask a question, I had lost all sense of confidence. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how I could get out of this. But then, Emma stood up and raised her glass. "All right, Greg, your turn," she said sweetly, almost as if nothing was wrong. "Ask us something." I froze. What could I ask them? Everything felt wrong. This entire situation felt wrong. But I had no choice but to play along. I glanced around the room, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. Then, on impulse, I asked, "What's the one thing Emma hates the most?" Everyone went silent. It was the first question that had caused any pause. Emma's smile faltered for a split second, and I could see the tension in her face. But then, she recovered quickly, and the rest of the room burst into laughter again. "That's easy," Olivia said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "She hates being wrong." The others nodded in agreement, and Emma laughed along, but I noticed the way her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. It was almost like she was hiding something, like she was playing a part in a game I hadn't been prepared for. As the game continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift. The tension in the air was thick, and I realized this wasn't just a game. This was their way of reminding me that I wasn't in control, that I was just the joke, the punchline, and I had no idea how far they were willing to take it. As the game continued, I began to feel more like an actor in a play I hadn't auditioned for, trapped in a role I didn't want. Every wrong answer was met with laughter, laughter that didn't feel kind anymore, but cruel, like a reminder of how little I mattered. The others seemed to find it amusing, but Emma, she was the one who made it sting the most. She wasn't just laughing at me, she was encouraging it. Her eyes sparkled with a kind of malicious glee that made my stomach turn. Was this really my wife? The woman I thought I knew? "All right, Greg," Olivia said, her voice dripping with anticipation. "It's time for your dare." I didn't want to hear those words. A part of me knew that whatever came next wouldn't be a simple, silly challenge. I had seen how far this game was going. I had seen how Emma enjoyed watching me stumble, how the others couldn't stop laughing at my expense. And now, I was going to have to do something humiliating. Emma leaned forward in her chair, her lips curling into a smirk. "You'll love this one, honey," she said sweetly, but I could hear the sarcasm in her voice. "We're going to make it fun for you. Aren't we, girls?" Her friends cheered in agreement, and I felt the weight of their stares on me. I wanted to speak up, to ask her to stop, to tell them all this wasn't funny anymore, but I stayed silent. I was too scared to voice my thoughts, too scared to break the illusion of happiness they all pretended to share. Okay, Greg. Olivia continued, leaning back with a satisfied smile. Your dare is simple. You have to go out onto the balcony and yell something out loud. Anything. But it has to be something personal. Something that'll make everyone here laugh. Something that'll make us all see how ridiculous you are. My heart sank. My palms were sweating as I tried to make sense of what I had just heard. Yell something personal? Something that would make me look stupid in front of everyone? The very idea of it made me want to crawl into a hole and never come out. But I could see the excitement in their eyes, the thrill they got from watching me squirm. Go on, Greg, Emma urged, her voice sweet and almost mocking. It'll be fun, I promise. I felt trapped. I could either go along with it, make a fool of myself in front of everyone, or I could stand up for myself, risk looking like the idiot, and maybe ruin the night for Emma. I glanced around the room, but everyone's eyes were on me. They were waiting for me to fail. They were waiting to see me humiliated. I took a deep breath and stood up. The room was still, all eyes on me, the pressure building with every second that passed. Slowly, I walked toward the balcony doors, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. When I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, but it didn't offer any comfort. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but they felt so far away, like I was standing on the edge of something much darker. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. I felt like I was choking on the weight of the moment, my throat tight with humiliation. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to make them laugh. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't a game. This wasn't just harmless fun. This was Emma's way of reminding me of my place in her life. I was nothing more than a joke. But then, as if by instinct, I heard myself speak. I'm not your clown, I whispered, my voice barely audible in the night air. The words felt like a confession, a secret I had been holding in for too long. I stood there, waiting for the laughter to erupt, for them to mock me, for Emma to tell me how pathetic I was. But it didn't come. The silence was deafening. Then, something unexpected happened. Emma's voice cut through the stillness. You think you're special, don't you? She said from inside. You think you're different from the rest of us. But the truth is, you're just like every other man I've known. You don't get it, do you? I froze. Her words stung more than any of the dares, more than the laughter, more than anything else. There was no laughter after that. No cheers, no applause. Just the suffocating weight of her words hanging in the air. I wasn't just the punchline. I was nothing. I turned to face them, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. The laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone. Now, all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that I had been so blind to Emma's contempt for me, or that I had played along with their game, thinking it was all just harmless fun. I slowly walked back inside, my eyes meeting Emma's. She didn't look at me the way she used to. She didn't look at me with love or care. No, she looked at me with something colder, something I didn't recognize. It wasn't even disgust. It was indifference. And that hurt more than anything else. Are you done with your little performance, Greg? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You can sit down now. We're just getting started. The room felt colder when I walked back inside, colder than it had ever been before. The moment I stepped in, Emma's eyes met mine, but there was no warmth, no affection, just a strange, cold detachment. It was as if the last shred of trust, the last glimmer of understanding we had shared, had evaporated. I tried to shake it off, but it was impossible. The laughter had faded, and in its place was an uncomfortable silence, the kind of silence that feels like it's closing in on you from all sides. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, the way everyone was watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out that door and never come back. But something inside me wouldn't let me. Maybe it was the fear of looking like a coward. Maybe it was the fact that I still hoped things would somehow go back to the way they were. I didn't know anymore. What I did know, though, was that the game had gone too far. Emma's friends had been taking turns asking me ridiculous questions, making me do stupid things. And every time, I had complied. I had played along, because I didn't want to rock the boat. But now I was realizing something I should have known all along. I had been the joke, the one who had never mattered to her, the one who would always be the punchline. I tried to sit down, to blend back into the background as I usually did, but this time, It felt impossible. I felt out of place, like a stranger in my own home. The room was filled with light chatter, but it all felt so distant, so hollow. Emma and her friends were laughing again, but it wasn't the same kind of laughter. It wasn't genuine. It was cruel, like they were feeding off my discomfort, enjoying every second of it. And then Olivia, with her wide grin, spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "Okay, Greg, time for round 2. You've been such a good sport so far. Let's see if you can keep it up." Her tone was dripping with mockery, and I could see the others eagerly leaning in, waiting for what was coming next. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What now?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. There was a moment of silence, just a heartbeat, before Olivia's grin widened even more, like a predator eyeing its prey. "Well, Greg," she began, "I think we need to test just how well you know your wife. Let's see if you can actually answer a question right this time." Her voice had that playful tone again, but it felt so much more sinister now. I was starting to realize that this wasn't just about a game. This wasn't just about fun. It was a power play. They were taking turns pushing me, testing my boundaries, seeing how much I could take before I broke. And at that moment, I knew something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just a participant anymore. I was the victim. I looked over at Emma. She wasn't laughing now. She wasn't even looking at me. She was staring at the floor, playing with her glass. I felt the bitterness rise in my throat. Was this how it had always been? Had I always been just the man who sat quietly, letting her have her fun, while I silently withered away in the background? Was that all I had ever been to her? Olivia's voice broke my thoughts. "All right, Greg, here's a good one for you. What is the one thing that Emma has always wanted but never gotten?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt like I was suffocating. I thought back to all the things Emma had said over the years, her dreams, her ambitions, the things she had always talked about doing but never actually did. I thought I knew her better than anyone else. After all, we'd been together for years. But now, with everyone's eyes on me, I felt completely lost. I racked my brain for the answer, but nothing came to me. I looked at Emma, waiting for some kind of hint, some kind of signal. But there was nothing. She just sat there, staring off into the distance, her face unreadable. "Come on, Greg," Olivia prodded. "You're supposed to know this." "What is it? You don't even know your wife, do you?" The others chuckled, but there was no humor in it. It was a cruel kind of laughter, and I could feel the heat of humiliation flooding my face. I had no idea what she wanted. I had never asked, never bothered to listen closely enough to figure it out. I had been so busy being the quiet, supportive husband, always standing in the shadows, that I never realized how far I'd fallen from her world. "Well," Olivia's voice snapped me back to reality. "What's your answer?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know," I muttered. My voice felt weak, defeated. And when the words left my lips, I could see it, the satisfaction in Emma's eyes, the way she finally looked at me like I was nothing more than an idiot, a failure. "You don't know, Greg?" she said, her voice cold. "I've always wanted to feel appreciated. Wanted you to show me that you care. But you've never done that, have you?" Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I couldn't breathe. I had spent all this time thinking I was doing everything right, being the husband who quietly supported her, who did everything in his power to keep her happy. But I hadn't even realized that I was invisible to her. I wasn't just her husband. I was the guy she tolerated, the guy who couldn't even remember the most important things about her. "Do you get it now, Greg?" Emma's voice was sharp, but her smile never reached her eyes. "This is who you are. This is what you've become. And it's too late to change it now." I felt the weight of her words settle over me, heavier than anything I'd ever felt before. The laughter, the games, the taunts, they were all part of the plan. She had never been on my side. I had been a joke to her all along. And in that moment, I realized something. I was done. Done with being the silent observer in my own life. I was done with the games. But the question was, what was I going to do about it? The weight of Emma's words hung in the air, suffocating everything around me. I wanted to scream, to stand up and confront her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The room was spinning, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like a complete stranger to her. She was no longer the woman I thought I knew. Instead, she had become someone else entirely, someone who enjoyed watching me break down. The other guests, her friends, were still laughing. They were still part of this cruel game, playing their roles as if it was all part of the fun. But I could no longer pretend. I could no longer convince myself that this was just harmless humor. This wasn't fun. This wasn't a game. This was Emma's way of telling me, in the harshest way possible, that I wasn't worth her time, that I was just a convenient fool to be toyed with. I stood there, frozen, as Emma casually turned back to her glass, swirling it slowly, her lips curling into a smirk. I felt my hands tremble at my sides, but I held them there, not wanting to show any more weakness. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take, but I wasn't going to break down, not yet, at least. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. So, Olivia said after a long pause, her voice cutting through the tension, "Greg, you've been so entertaining tonight. But, we haven't had a good laugh in a while." Her tone was sweet, but it was laced with venom. "How about we make it interesting?" I could feel my heart race as all eyes turned toward me. I wasn't sure what she meant by making it interesting, but I didn't have to wonder for long. Olivia stood up and clinked her glass, the sound too sharp in the quiet room. "All right, Greg, we're going to play a new game. But this one's different. This time, the stakes are higher. It's simple, really. You'll do what we tell you, and you'll answer honestly. But if you refuse, well," she trailed off with a sickening grin, letting the threat hang in the air. Emma's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You can either play by the rules, Greg, or you can leave. But leaving means we all know you're a coward. And if you stay and refuse to do anything we say, well, that would just be embarrassing." The room went silent as I felt the full weight of her gaze on me. I thought about leaving. I thought about walking out and never coming back. But there was something about her, something about the way she spoke with such casual cruelty, that made it impossible. She wasn't just making fun of me anymore. She was breaking me down. And I was trapped in this sick little web, the strands of which seemed to tighten with every passing second. "Greg," Emma said softly, but there was no kindness in her tone. "It's your choice. Do what we say, or go home with your tail between your legs." The words stung, but they also fueled something inside me, a fire I hadn't realized was there before. Was this really how she saw me? Was I really just the fool she could push around? No, I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her have this control over me anymore. With a deep breath, I made my decision. I wasn't going to walk away, but I wasn't going to play their game the way they wanted me to. I had to take control back somehow, even if it meant losing everything. I turned to face Emma, my heart pounding in my chest. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "But don't think this is over. I'm not your joke." There was a brief flicker of surprise in Emma's eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by that same smug expression. Well, Greg," she said, leaning back in her chair. "I didn't think you had it in you. But let's see how long that lasts." The others laughed, but there was something different now. I wasn't just the quiet, submissive husband anymore. I wasn't playing along with their cruel little game. I wasn't going to be their entertainment anymore. Olivia, looking disappointed that I hadn't crumbled, took a step forward. "Okay, Greg, if you think you're so tough, let's see if you can handle the truth. We all know you've been walking around like you don't care, but we know the truth, don't we? You're pathetic. You know it, I know it, and Emma sure as hell knows it." I didn't flinch. Her words were harsh, but they didn't hurt the way they once would have. I was done playing the fool. I was done being the man they laughed at. The game they were playing was over, whether they realized it or not. But they didn't stop. They kept pushing, trying to get me to snap, trying to get me to do something. Anything. That would make them feel powerful. "All right, Greg," Olivia said, her voice almost pitying now. "I'll give you a chance. Here's the deal. We're all going to write down something that we know will hurt you. Something we know will break you. And then, you have to read it aloud. Let's see how much you can take." I froze. My heart skipped a beat as I realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't just about embarrassing me. This was about breaking me, completely, and leaving nothing behind. But as I stood there, facing Emma and her friends, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to let them break me. I wasn't going to give them that power. "Go ahead," I said quietly, my voice unwavering. "Write whatever you want. But you'll see, this won't break me. It'll only prove how small you all really are." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by the sound of pens scratching on paper. And in that silence, something shifted in me. I wasn't just going to play along anymore. I was going to take back control, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of myself. The night was far from over, and neither was the game, but it was about to change. The room was thick with tension, each passing second stretching longer than the last. I watched as the others scribbled down their thoughts, their smirks only growing more twisted with every word written. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me. Emma's gaze, cold and calculating, Olivia's piercing glare, the subtle, almost sadistic smiles of the others. My heart pounded in my chest, but there was no fear anymore. It was anger, bubbling up from deep within, hot and sharp. Anger at the way they treated me. Anger at how they thought they could break me with words, with cheap tricks. I had stayed silent for too long, allowed myself to be a part of their little game, but now I was done. They handed me their slips of paper, and I could see the anticipation in their eyes. They wanted me to crack. They wanted to see me crumble, to hear me say something that would make them feel in control. I hesitated for a moment, my eyes scanning the cruel, mocking words written on each piece of paper. It was all the same. Insults, barbs aimed at my pride, my failures, my insecurities. But none of it mattered anymore. None of it could hurt me like it once did. Not after everything they'd already put me through. I took a deep breath and unfolded the first note. Emma's handwriting was neat, deliberate. You're nothing but a shadow of the man you used to be. I don't even remember why I fell in love with you anymore. I paused, reading it over. There was no sting, no hurt, only a strange sense of clarity. I had been living in the shadow of this moment, but now I could finally see the truth. She had never truly respected me. She had never truly seen me as an equal. I wasn't her partner. I was her tool, her accessory. And she had worn me down to the point where I had accepted it. I crumpled the note in my hand and set it aside. The others were waiting for me to react, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I moved to the next one, this time from Olivia. You're a joke, Greg. A weak, boring, predictable joke. Emma's too good for you. You've been fooling yourself thinking she ever loved you. The words were sharper, colder, but again, they didn't land the way they once would have. I could feel the anger rise, not at her. No, not at Olivia, but at myself. How had I let myself get here? How had I allowed myself to be the punchline for so long? I was done with this. Done with them. Done with the lies. I crushed the second note and tossed it aside. I wasn't giving them the power to see how much they'd affected me. Not anymore. The third note came from Jenna. You're just a doormat, Greg. You let Emma walk all over you, and you always will. She'll never respect you. The words echoed in my mind, but they didn't cause the pain they were supposed to. Instead, I felt something else, resentment. Resentment for every time I had let Emma push me around, for every moment I had allowed myself to be weak for her. I had always put her first, always bent over backward to please her, to keep her happy, but all it had gotten me was ridicule. She hadn't wanted my love, she wanted my obedience. I shoved the note into my pocket, my jaw clenched tight. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I finally realized I didn't need her. I didn't need any of them. They could write their notes, they could laugh at me, they could tear me apart with their words, but it didn't matter. I stood up slowly, turning to face Emma. Her eyes locked with mine, but this time, there was no warmth, no affection, only cold indifference. You done reading those? She asked, her voice sharp, almost bored. Was it everything you expected? I didn't answer her immediately. I took a step forward, feeling the weight of the room on my shoulders. The silence was deafening. All of them, waiting, watching, expecting me to break down, to cry, to beg. But I wasn't going to give them that. Not anymore. I'm done, I said, my voice low but steady. I'm done being your joke. I'm done playing this game. And I'm done with all of you. The room went dead silent. For the first time that night, the air felt heavy, suffocating. Emma's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. It wasn't the reaction she had been expecting. She had always been able to control me, to make me the butt of every joke, but now, for the first time in years, I was taking control. You can all sit here and laugh. I continued, my voice growing stronger with every word. You can make your little jokes, write your cruel notes, and tear me down however you want. But I'm not the man you think I am. And I'm not going to stand here and let you do this to me anymore. I looked directly at Emma, my eyes locking with hers. You think you've won, but you haven't. You've only made me realize how little I mean to you. And honestly, I don't think I care anymore. The others exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. Emma's face was expressionless, but I could see the flicker of anger in her eyes. She was used to having control, used to making me feel small, insignificant. But not anymore. You think you're leaving? Emma finally spoke, her voice sharp. You think you can just walk away from this? From me? You're nothing without me. Her words stung, but this time, they didn't have the power they once did. No, Emma, I said, my voice steady. I'm not nothing. I'm someone who finally realizes what he deserves. And it's not this. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling their eyes on me, but not letting it stop me. The weight of the years of abuse, the years of putting her needs before mine, the years of silence, they all began to lift as I stepped closer to the door. I wasn't going to let them tear me down anymore. I wasn't going to let her make me feel small. I was done, and as I reached the door, I turned back for one last look. Emma was staring at me, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. The others, too, were silent, shocked at what they had just witnessed. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. I was walking out of that door a different man, and I wasn't coming back. The door slammed behind me with a force I didn't even realize I had. For a second, I just stood there, in the silence of the hallway, the echo of the laughter still ringing in my ears. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something else, a strange mix of relief and adrenaline. I had done it. I had walked away. I had finally broken free of the chains I didn't even realize I had been carrying for so long. But even as I stood there, the weight of everything that had just happened settled in. The truth was clearer now than it had ever been. I had been living a lie. Emma had always known it. She had known exactly how to manipulate me, how to keep me in my place, how to make me believe I was nothing without her. But that was over. I wasn't going to be her puppet anymore. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button to the ground floor, the motion almost mechanical. The harsh lights of the hallway felt distant, almost irrelevant. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that apartment hours ago. No, I had changed. I could feel it in my bones. Every step I took away from that place felt like a victory, but the questions started to creep in. What now? What was I supposed to do after all of this? I thought about what Emma had said. You're nothing without me. The words stung at first, but as I stepped into the cool night air, the sting faded. I realized something that made my chest tighten with new determination. I wasn't nothing. I was everything I needed. I didn't need her, or her friends, or anyone who had ever tried to make me feel small. The streets of the city were eerily quiet at this hour, but the hum of distant traffic and the occasional car passing by somehow felt comforting. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to let her have control over me ever again. I found myself walking aimlessly, the cool air a welcome relief from the suffocating heat of the apartment. My mind was still reeling. The game, the notes, the dares, it was all so surreal, like something out of a twisted dream. How had I let things get so far? How had I allowed Emma and her friends to treat me like this? All the times I had played the fool, thinking I was helping her, supporting her. All the times I had swallowed my pride, convinced myself that I was doing the right thing. But none of it mattered now. I had been nothing more than a character in her story, a supporting role in her drama. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, half expecting to see a message from Emma or one of her friends. But it wasn't them. It was my brother, Jake. We hadn't spoken much lately, but I always knew I could count on him when things got tough. I hesitated for a moment before opening the message. Hey man, you okay? Haven't heard from you in a while. Let me know if you need anything. For some reason, his simple message felt like a lifeline. Someone cared. Someone outside of that toxic world I had been trapped in. I quickly typed out a response, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm done. I finally left. I think I'm free. Jake's reply came almost instantly. Good. You deserve better than that. I've been worried about you, man. You need a place to crash for a while. I've got an extra room. Let me know. The offer was there, simple, honest, and without expectation. I didn't need to think about it for long. The idea of a fresh start, away from all the manipulation and the games, felt like a lifeline. I didn't need Emma's approval anymore. I didn't need her friend's approval. I just needed to take care of myself. I typed back quickly, my mind already made up. I'm coming over. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it more than you know. As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just the relief of leaving. It was the realization that I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I gathered a few things from the apartment, but I didn't bother with anything that would weigh me down. I left the things that didn't matter behind, the photos, the trinkets, the memories that had been tainted by Emma's cruelty. I wasn't going to let those things keep me tethered to a past that wasn't mine anymore. By the time I arrived at Jake's place, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. I had no idea what the future held. I didn't know what was next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I was free. Jake greeted me with a smile and a firm hug, and I felt a small piece of the puzzle click into place. This was what I needed. Real, unconditional support. Not the fake affection and control I had gotten used to. As I sat down on the couch in his living room, the familiar sense of peace began to settle over me. I wasn't sure what the next chapter of my life would look like, but I knew one thing. I was done being the joke, and I was never going back to that life. I finally felt like I could breathe again. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, relief, fear, and a strange sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. At Jake's place, I found a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The cluttered apartment I had called home for so long now felt like a distant memory. Every corner, every object in that space had been a reminder of what I had endured. But here, with Jake, everything felt different. It was calm. It was real. Jake was an incredible support system. We spent the first few days just talking about everything and nothing. We laughed at the ridiculousness of my situation, but also had serious conversations about what I wanted for my future. It felt so strange to be talking about my life without the weight of Emma's judgment hanging over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a voice. I felt like I mattered. Over the next few weeks, I slowly began to rebuild. I found a new apartment, one that felt like it could truly be my own. I went out with Jake and some of his friends, enjoying the kind of laughter that wasn't laced with cruelty. I even started picking up old hobbies I'd abandoned, writing, painting, things I had forgotten about while trying to keep up with the life Emma had imposed on me. It felt like waking up from a long sleep. But it wasn't just the external changes that made the difference. It was the internal shift. For the first time, I was choosing myself. I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not based on someone else's needs or expectations. Months passed, and I settled into my new life. I reconnected with old friends, ones I had lost touch with over the years. They welcomed me back with open arms, and for the first time, I could see clearly how toxic my past relationships had been. Emma and her friends, their games, their manipulation, they were nothing but a chapter in my story, and I was finally ready to close that book. One evening, while sitting at a coffee shop with Jake, I looked around and realized something. I was happy, truly happy. It wasn't the kind of happiness that came from being in control or from getting revenge. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about peace. It was about knowing that I was enough, just as I was. And it was about knowing that no matter what, I was always capable of starting over. I had my independence, my self-respect, and most importantly, I had a future ahead of me, one that I could shape on my own terms. The person I was now was someone I could be proud of. No longer the quiet, overlooked husband. No longer the man who had let himself be invisible. I was Greg, the man who had the courage to walk away and start fresh, the man who had learned the hard way but had come out stronger on the other side. And as I sat there with Jake, the sun setting outside, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time, I was in control of my own life. And that, I realized, was the greatest freedom of all. No more games. No more lies. Just the promise of a new beginning. And I was ready for it.